So now let's get into what some of those 11 strategies are when one is in a co-teaching situation. So, Matt, which ones do you want to talk about first?
I like to start off. I mean, there's always the one teach, one assist, and that's definitely where we don't want to be at. I want to start off with this notion of team teaching because I think it's a great way to come together and start a class because you're sitting in front with the other co-teacher. You may have a slide deck or interactive slide deck, and both of you are actually, I call it a very dynamic experience because maybe one person goes over the objective, then someone goes over the agenda, then you go right into that formative assessment to begin the class or that lesson, where maybe one of the co-teachers begins modeling how to complete that math problem before giving another math problem for their students. And then maybe if it's an interactive slideshow with that formative assessment, then that one teacher is now starting to then monitor the student responses as they're working on their digital whiteboard or mini whiteboard as they go through. And then as they start seeing the trend, they may start pulling a few students over to the side and start working with them in a small little station to the far right hand side. And then as the timer goes, there's 5, 6 minutes left for that opening formative assessment. That one teacher is working with that small group, checking for understanding, maybe showing them one more example or so. And then when they bring them all back, both co-teachers can come back and essentially discuss the problem that they went over. And both of them can add, maybe one goes over an example, then another one does another example. So I like to start off with the team teaching piece. And as you noticed, I kind of went over and did a little bit of alternative teaching, where essentially where that small group took place. So you can see that the strategies are very dynamic and they ebb and flow. But I always like to start with team teaching because then that really sets the table for the lesson, and you can move forward from there. It kind of sets the tone.
Yeah, and it really highlights why it is so important for co-teachers to get a groove going and to work with one another most of the time so they get into those rhythms where they can co-teach effectively together and that they have the planning time to do that. Because, and this is unfortunately, I think, one of the reasons we do tend to see one teach, one assist, because it requires no planning time because one teacher's teaching and the other person's handing out papers,
Right.
which is a very, very expensive paraprofessional, in my
Yes.
opinion. So,
Yes.
so I like how you said that, Matt, and I like also how you integrated, in a way, two models: co-teaching or team teaching, as you put it, and alternative teaching. Because to your point, it's not like, okay, I'm going to do team teaching now, but weaving in the different strategies or weaving in the different models for the needs of the students that you have in that classroom. So I love that. Belinda, are there any strategies you would add to what Matt was saying?
Absolutely. And what I'd love to do is also give a scenario. An amazing middle school team that I worked with. I watched them start their day with parallel teaching. And in parallel teaching, both teachers have the same content, but we divide the class into two. And in the groups, we have mixed students. Okay. We're not just doing one group as special ed and one group as general ed. We're mixed groups of students. And they taught parallel teaching as a math class for about 15 minutes. Then they came back together as a class and they did conversation teaching. And it was so much fun to watch. They both took sides of the classroom. They were both holding a whiteboard. And the math teacher was asking the specialist, although the kids don't know that, but I'm just telling you for the scenario, uh, some different things to write on her board. So he would say, can you write the number 1,000,000, for example? And she would write it incorrectly. And then he'd be, well, are you sure? And they'd have this conversation back and forth. And then she would start asking him questions. Well, the questions she had come up with while she was just spending 20 minutes with her group and she saw the challenges some of the students were having. And so she was asking questions that they had asked her. But it was just a fun, conversation going on back and forth. And then they did independent work and both of them monitored the classroom. So it wasn't one teach, one support. It was really both of them and working together to monitor and check and just see where students were. So that was just such a cool opportunity. Another strategy that's already been brought up, but I just have to share with this great example, a sixth grade classroom. It was also a math classroom. They give a test every Thursday. And the test only has 3 questions, and it's whatever they're working on. Take 3 questions. If you pass all 3, you go to enrichment group. If you miss one of those 3, you can decide as a student, do I want to go to enrichment or do I want to like back up and really, learn the content? But if you miss 2 or 3, you have to back up and go to reteach. And they do this every single Thursday. And they find a mix of kids because math changes all the time. And, some of the kids end up in reteach one week and they end up in enrichment another week, just depending on, what they picked up and the information. And I just think that's a great way to use alternative teaching. But what that group also does is they run a lot of stations in their classroom. And so they'll set up an independent station where students are working independently. And then maybe one teacher will be doing Pythagorean theorem, let's say, and another teacher is working on, let's say, problem solving, getting ready for state assessment test. And the kids have to spend like 20 minutes at each station during the hour they're with the teacher. I love that model as well. So